Welcome to Hipsterless Hangout. We're back a little late.
We are your hosts. I've introduced myself before, so nice to see you again. We're reviewing Clueless this time around. So one of my favorite comedy movies. This movie it came out in 1995, and I have seen it many, many, many times. How many times have you seen it in general, do you think?
Jeez.
Is it just a couple?
I would say it's probably around 5. It's hard to say, So we're both born in the mid 80s, and this movie would have came out when we were 9. And I'll have to ask you, your memory of this, because I'm sure that we saw it when we were young. I don't really know when I first saw it. I feel like it was almost certainly not far from when it was released, but this movie was such a big deal, and the whole Valley Girl thing was certainly in prominence when we were in elementary school. Like, this influenced kids. And so if anything, I was more aware of the impact that it had in that way than the movie itself, because I don't know how many times I've seen it. Do you remember when you first saw it?
So that Clueless really took off in popularity as soon as it came out, and it really did a lot in influencing definitely the vernacular, the linguistics of the time, and very much the Valley Girl type of dress with the mini skirts and just the whole, I guess, attitude. And so it really did play a huge pivotal role in that element of it. But I've seen it many times independently, but also with friends. Of course, it was more popular among the female contingent than it was amongst males. But I think that the kind of humor that is prevalent within the movie, especially as I've aged and gotten older, it still holds up very well, if not better. A lot of the salty snippets that Cher and company make. Mm-hmm. And I think it's aged very well. I like to see it every now and then. I actually own this movie on DVD as well. So I'm glad that I have it, because I do like to revisit it every so often.
Yeah. The whole Valley Girl thing was just inescapable. And we didn't really know much about LA, even though we grew up in California. But this movie was such a big deal, and it really kickstarted. Paul Rudd is in this film. It's kind of one of his first films, and Alicia Silverstone, Brittany Murphy, you said. I don't really know. Oh, well, as her teacher, Wallace Shawn, who you met, and you'll have to tell that story. And
awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I would love to meet him.
He was pretty cool.
Who else is in it? I'm trying to think of.
Well, Stacey Dash plays Dion. It's Alicia Silverstone, by the way. That's how it's pronounced. Brittany Murphy. It's so strange seeing her young and so vivacious, because as some of you might know, she passed away in 2009 at the age of 32. So seeing her, she was 15, I believe, during the recording of this. And it's interesting too, because Alicia Silverstone, I believe, was 17, so 16 or 17. So she was very young too. Stacey Dash was 27 and had a child already. But the male characters, I don't know as much about. I've seen the skater kid, Travis, who was adorable, and maybe one or two other things. But aside from the females, I suppose Paul Rudd is the one that I was and am the most familiar with.
Is the skater kid the guy who's always tardy?
Correct. The one who felt it necessary to give a speech about his.
That was a great one. So that was actually Breckin Meyer. That's one of the only other actors that I know. And Jeremy Sisto's in it, but I don't know who he plays.
Is he the one who played Elton?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, really? Yeah, he's in 13. Mm-hmm. I've only seen him in 13. We'll review that at a later point too, but I haven't seen him in aside from just those two films, 13 and then Clueless, or Clueless and then 13 came some years later.
So we kind of talked about, this is one of the movies we've actually talked about before the recording, and I had kind of clued you into how I wanted to start this recording, which was like, I'm going to say the one complaint that I have, and then we can just rave about this for a while because we both loved it. We're not going to like hold that back till the end of the episode. We both really loved this movie. I thought it was really funny. So I'm just going to start with my one minor complaint, and it is minor. In my head, when I think of stuff like Wayne's World or I think of great 90s comedies, the difficulty I have with this movie is just kind of how aimless the plot is. It's this movie about, she's altruistically helping people. She loses popularity to the girl that she helps, and you think maybe that's going to be the plot where she regains it, but it's not. She's helping other people find love. And so maybe that's the plot, kind of, not really. And then at the very end, there's literally a line of dialogue where she's like, wait, I want a boyfriend. And then she finds her self love. But that's not the plot. It's just kind of like days in the life of this person, which is fine. I just sort of wish that there was a little bit more of a cohesive story. That's literally the only complaint I have about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it took me a while when I was 10 and watching this movie, it was more about like the fashion and looking at the aesthetic appeal of being rich and in Beverly Hills. And it was more about the social dynamics at school. And, but what I think, and I've actually watched on DVD, the making of the film and interviews with the cast, and basically she does begin the movie as a bit of very much a superficial person. She's nice in her own way. She's kind to the housekeeper and looks after her father and makes sure he eats well and keeps his cholesterol down. And at first, when she wants to help Ty, it's coming more from a place of wanting to assert some kind of control and show up Josh, who was her ex-stepbrother. And yeah, she wants to bring the two lonely old teachers together, but it's from a place of so that he'll be happier and hence give her share better grades, right? So she's kind and sweet in her own sheltered, modified way. But as the story progresses, she does become much more of a depthful person, and it becomes more about doing well by others for the sake thereof. And by the end of the film, we love this girl. She's genuinely friends with Ty Frazier, who at first was her experiment. She is accepting of Travis, the tardy stoner, having worked his way into their group and being the then boyfriend of Ty. And she just becomes a much more profound character. And through failing a few times, misreading people, she misread Christian, this guy she was pursuing to be her boyfriend. That didn't work out. She misaligned matching up Ty with one of the high school, just one of the high school popular kids who she ended up being really disappointed in. She fails her driver's license test in a really funny scene of causing property damage and almost killing somebody. So she had to fail to really be brought down to earth. And by the end of the film, she's a much better person for it.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. And like the plot being, just her growth as an individual. I suppose that is a way that I could look at it. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to rave about with this. And I mean, the comedy is really funny. I hadn't seen this in years. We mentioned we'd both seen this before, but I probably hadn't seen this since I was a teenager. So it very well could be 20 years, if not more, I don't think that like when I was 18 I was rewatching this, but maybe I was. And it's really funny. I was surprised, I was shocked, you know, because we are both especially 90s comedy fans and we've watched some of the obvious ones like dozens and hundreds of times, you know. So I would have just thought if this was one that I loved, then I would have watched it that much. Maybe it was just that it was female focused,
Yeah, yeah, it was.
probably, you know. But at the same time, it's really good. And I also like you said, she does grow, and maybe it's starting from a place of selfishness and it grows to a place of being genuine. But one thing I loved about her character is how kind she is. It's it's not done for laughs. It's not done as some sort of save the cat moment or anything like that. It's done just she's a genuinely good person. And I love the teacher plot is the best example. There's no end joke in there. It doesn't end with some moment of that's all for laughs, or and it doesn't even end with her taking credit for it. The teachers never find out that she set them up, and it's just done out of her seeing these two people and wanting, yeah, wanting better grades, but also she genuinely wants them to be happy. And it's just so cool to see a character who's written that way and who's given space to develop in that way in a short movie, a tight script where a lot of times you don't have room for characters to grow and develop. I really liked that about the writing of this.
What I really liked about the movie too is that it really diversified the social dynamic. I went to a high school actually, which miraculously did have that mixing of the jocks with the theater geeks and with it didn't matter like the cultural background of somebody. High schools like that do exist, but what I really liked about this one too is it and it didn't make an issue of it. It blended well, for example, Dion's background and then shares. And then we see Travis, who came from a lower, well, presumably Travis and Ty from just different, yeah, different backgrounds and maybe a somewhat lower socioeconomic class. But by the end of the movie, they're all sitting at a table together and enjoying just enjoying their friendships and they're attending the wedding of their teachers and it doesn't call attention to the blending of different people and I really appreciate that because oftentimes in movies that can be highlighted and exacerbated and it doesn't make an issue of it. And I really appreciated that it did that so seamlessly because that's hard to find in especially high school click based well, click based in a click type of sense, it's difficult to find that dynamic without there being a blatant calling of attention to it.
Right. And it was the same thing I noticed with the pot smoking kids. I thought it was kind of funny how, I mean, I haven't been in high school in a long time, but how funny it was that the way that it was depicted in this movie is kind of the same as how I felt when I went to school. And I don't see a lot of difference. I mean, obviously, marijuana is legal now in a lot of the US, but there's still this degree of separation between the people who really get into it and become stoners and the people who sort of casually might try it. And she hits a joint at one point in the movie, so she's not all high and mighty, but she's also not a stoner. There's a differentiation. And I like that because that's much more true to life. I feel like the way that you said with the blending of the peer groups as well as that sort of a thing of there's not black and white lines in real reality and in real schools. Everyone's doing a little bit of everything. And you might have a friend who's a jock and you might have a friend who's a total burnout and they might be able to just cross the line just like that. It's not all black and white. It's never just that simple. And I appreciate that this is a much more realistic view in that way.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just it's funny too watching certain scenes that when I was a 10-year-old seemed so devious, like the party that they went to in Sun Valley. And I remember at the time feeling like it was such a devious social gathering. And oh my goodness, there's loud music and people
Right.
throwing up in pools. Yeah, I mean, I would begin attending those parties, not as a participant, but as more of a spectator, because I ran with a sort of um, a crowd which deviated from my own behavior. Some of the friendships that I had in middle school, and I guess the first, well, off and on during high school, but especially when I was quite a bit younger, I would begin attending parties like that to some degree over the years. But watching it now, it's such a tame, fluffy, innocent scene. There's music, there are people, there's a joint going around at one point, and that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
there was really nothing dark and sinister about it. And I remember the perception at that time. And what are some other examples? Well, the scene soon thereafter where she is with Elton and he's making a move on her, and then she gets out of the car. And that too, I remember feeling like it was such a devious, dangerous situation which she was in, and it could have been, but the energy communicated in that scene was she was seeing him for who he was, and she got out of the car and Josh came to the rescue, and it didn't have the heaviness that I remember associating with scenes like that when I was quite a bit younger.
There's certainly a lack of kind of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? But there's sort of a lack of overly dramatic moments, which I think again is just very realistic. It's the same thing with the comedy. I think it's why the comedy works so well, is that it's not swinging for the fences. It's not like these are insane characters dressed in insane clothes doing insane things. This isn't sketch comedy. This is just real it's a comedy of misunderstanding a lot of the times and a little bit of exaggeration. She has I want to mention the clothes machine in the beginning where she dials up her outfit and it like X's it out when it doesn't match, which is so wonderful. Like she's a person who's into style and yet she needs a machine to tell her, you know? And then as well as the this just like you've been quoting it a bunch of times, but what is it, Kuwait? Kuwait's in the
Where in Kuwait? Oh, so her father calls her up and demands to know where she is because she's getting close to missing curfew. And he says, I expect you to be home in 20 minutes. Everywhere in LA takes 20 minutes. Not true, by the way. But she says, it might take longer than that, Dad. And he says, where are you? Kuwait? Is that in the valley?
Right.
I mean, it's the kind of contrast between she can be so superficially innocent, but then so quick-witted and sharp during other segments of the film, and sometimes not even in various segments per se, but in pretty close proximity to one another within the same scene or the same conversation. She vacillates between this very ditzy, young, almost childlike character, and then very salty, biting, very intelligent humor. And it's that constant dance that was just intriguing about her.
Yeah. And so then her friend, what's her main friend's character name?
Dion or Ty?
Dion. I thought Dion, yeah, like talk about another really well written character. She doesn't have a lot of, change in the film. She starts out with the same boyfriend that she ends the movie. It does reveal at one point that their slightly antagonistic relationship is just kind of a little bit of a cover, the relationship between Dion and her boyfriend.
Murray.
Okay. And I thought that was a really nice moment. We get to see that there's genuine affection there and we understand why it works. And I thought it was funny that he's always calling her my woman.
I love that actor, by the way. He's so funny. I love his his supporting role in that movie. Whoever he is, I don't know his name.
And the big like the really low baggy pants with like the style is kind of amazingly still happening. Like I feel like the big baggy pants and the exposed underwear, like the huge jackets, I feel like that's still how people dress, honestly, in some places. But yeah, I mean, it's just a really, I mean, I shouted out Dion just now. Is there anyone special you want to shout out?
Character wise, actor wise, I like most of them. I'm sorry, I like all of them for the roles they played. I did, yeah, so I did meet Wallace Shawn at a CVS at about 10 o'clock at night in downtown Los Angeles, and he was there. Nobody seemed to be recognizing him. I did. So I kind of eyed him for a couple of minutes and asked a security guard working if that was an actor. I didn't know his name at the time, his real name. And I eventually approached him and asked him, "Are you that actor in Clueless and Princess Bride?" And he goes, "Why, yes, I am." And he looked and sounded identical, exactly the same. And probably 3 decades had passed since Princess Bride because that movie came out in 1980. I saw Wally Shawn as he introduced himself in 2019. So quite a bit of time had passed. And I didn't ask for an autograph or anything. I just told him I liked his movies and then ran away and hid in one of the aisles. But I wish retrospectively that I would have gotten at least a photograph because he didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that I approached him. I just didn't want to infringe.
Right. And he's a true legend of stage and screen. He's My Dinner with Andre is an amazing film that I highly recommend to everybody. And he's in a lot of independent cinema. He's obviously really well known for The Princess Bride. But yeah, I mean, he's great as the teacher and then the teacher that they find for him. I think she's the gym coach or
She was environmental science, Miss Geist. Miss Geist.
I just love that character and they're perfect together. They're both these like kind of mousy, weird little
Super nerdy looking.
Yeah.
I think she's like way taller than him.
Yeah, I mean it's just like it's one of those examples of how sometimes everything just sort of works and you don't get a lot of those and it's the perfect length. It's not too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And there's enough going in there. I'm kind of shocked, frankly. I'm thankful, but I'm kind of shocked that there hasn't been sequels or remakes of this. And did you know, I only saw this today. Did you know that there was a Clueless TV show?
Yeah, we talked about that
Oh.
a few nights ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I never saw it. I didn't want to spoil my perception of the movie by watching other people play. There's another girl that plays Cher, for example. They kept some of the same characters, but then substituted other ones. So Dion remained the same. Another girl played Cher, so Stacey Dash plays Dion in the show as well, but they used another girl who looks a lot like Alicia Silverstone to play her in the show. Ty was another actress. I think Amber they kept. I enjoyed Amber, by the way, her little antagonistic relationship with Cher. So they kept some supporting characters, but I wasn't interested. And we didn't have television at the time anyhow. So hence, even if I had been interested, I wouldn't have been able to watch it.
And it doesn't seem like a lot of people did because it didn't last very long. But I mean, I would expect iTunes or Amazon. Literally, I could flip that on tomorrow and see a remake of this. And so it got me wondering. I don't know how up you are on current. Is there anyone that you would cast in a modern remake of Clueless?
A modern remake or a sequel?
Remake, yeah. If they were gonna do it now.
I don't keep up with younger actresses. I mean, Amanda Seyfried seems to be in flipping everything, so she's the first face that kind of comes to name. But she was in Mean Girls, by the way, so that's a different generational movie, which that was never one of my favorites. But I hope that they don't do a remake. I think that It should be left alone. I think nothing could be better, nothing could be improved, and I don't like the whole trend of making remakes and adding on unnecessary sequels. I hope that it just remains as is, and I think that it'll continue to age very well. Such a classic now.
Yeah. And I know that like I said, we didn't talk about this before, but just to return to our previous format, I don't really have any thematic things that I picked out on or picked up on, I should say. Do you have any like bigger picture thematics from the movie that you took away or that you wanted to talk about?
Well, it was interesting because I did live the entirety of, as I've mentioned before, of my adult life in Los Angeles. So now seeing pictures of like when she's shopping in Rodeo Drive, she goes to I think that was which shopping mall was that? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. It's near UCLA. So I've been to that shopping mall. I used to have a job which was located just around the corner from it, basically. And so we would go there before our shift begun. And so it is interesting recognizing, being more cognizant of the overall environment. But a lot of it was pretty localized, actually. We didn't see a lot of Beverly Hills. We saw shots of the interior and exterior of her home, the high school, but I appreciated that they didn't overdo it with the ostentatiousness. The biggest example of that we got was the outfits, but we didn't see a lot of external glitz and glam, which I think really helped and assisted the film in making her, basically, as the story progresses, much more humble and much more willing to socialize with the commoners and becoming a lot less judgmental. And to clarify that, she was always, I believe, an innocently, fundamentally good person, but I think she became more profound and much less superficial in her own way as well as the story progressed, and just more adult, just more grown up. So I think that the environment not being overly glitzy or glamorous really did assist her or it assisted the progression and the maturation of her character as well, and just becoming more of a soulful individual.
Yeah, because I do think like it's a fine line to walk, and if they had tuned it wrong, this character would be completely unrelatable. Because she's a rich girl in Beverly Hills, and how many of us can relate to that? You know, who's extremely privileged and who is an idiot also. I mean, she's not like completely stupid, but she's, you know, she's a ditz. So it's a fine line to walk to still make us connect with her as an audience, especially like, I mean, geez, I'm a 39-year-old man. I should not connect with her. The writing should not.
I still do.
You know, but I do because it's well written, you know. And yeah, I didn't really come away with any themes either. I mean, I guess there's a broad theme about doing things for the right reasons. I guess, you know, that's what you're saying is like in her growth, it goes from wrong reasons to right reasons. So, you know, examine your reasons maybe is a theme you could pick up, or the theme of finding love in unexpected places. So on that note, I mean, I do wonder why it's not that it specifically has aged poorly, but I do think it's aged poorly. But I think it was a weird call at the time, and I think it's an odd part of the movie that she ends up dating her brother-in-law, her ex-brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that speaks to a little bit of why this film's legacy isn't as well known. I mean, I doubt that that's the thing that's keeping people away from it, but it's just, I do think that this movie is a tad more forgotten than some of the 90s comedies. And that is a weird thing on a rewatch. I don't remember taking anything away from that angle when I was younger, but especially now, it's like, that's odd and I don't like it. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, she did in the beginning of the movie. Oh, by the way, it's funny at the beginning when her father. Oh, and I really like the. We'll get to that in a bit, but the father dynamic and how
Mhm.
she regards him, and but he did make some comment about um visiting his low life, visiting those low life idiots, and she goes, "They are your parents."
That's good. And that's another actor. That's Dan Hedaya. Now
Oh
that I
yeah.
think about it, that actor.
But it was during that conversation that he says he's your stepbrother, and she specifically says very clearly, and we get a full frame of her face so that we're supposed to remember. Apparently, she says you were hardly married to his mother, and that was 5 years ago. So I guess that makes it somewhat less taboo and questionable. It does, but it's still
Mhm.
a odd dynamic. I mean, couldn't they have just dated but not married? The parents. I
Right,
mean, come
right,
on.
right. Or
So
couldn't it have been like, that's a kid that her dad used to be the mentor of or something? I don't know. It could have been a few different things. And it's not only that they are ex brother and sister in law, it's also how chummy they are and they're like hanging out. And it's like, and I realize that that is indicative of the chemistry between them potentially as lovers also, but it's just, it seems like it was a, when they were brother and sister, it seems like it was a pretty close relationship, which is also like the weird part of it. Yeah.
mhm. Well, I perceived it as always having been maybe when they were actually living together, they were just, they didn't know each other very well. But it was as she got older and he got older and he wanted to be a lawyer. Her father was a lawyer. So there was this continued involvement with our family, which irritated her because he wasn't the kind of cool friend or associate or acquaintance or family member who she wanted to uh who she wanted to associate herself with. So I took it as always having been maybe distant and then progressed to more of an antagonistic relationship. But it's any way you cut it, it's just kind of a strange dynamic. I don't think today that would really go over quite as well, especially considering her age at
Mhm.
the time that she was supposed to be in the movie and his age and that comparison as well. It's questionable.
Yeah. Are you a Paul Rudd fan in general?
I liked him in Knocked Up and I liked him in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, but that's because I like those two movies of Judd Apatow in general. So I I know him in more films than that, but those are the two where I think he did well, and I wouldn't call myself a fan, but I'm familiar enough with him. Did you know he was in Halloween
I
6?
was about to mention that, which came out the same year. And
Oh my gosh.
I mean, talk about an interesting year for him. And it's interesting because I've seen Halloween 6 somewhat recently, and he's really bad in it. He's not a good actor in it, and he's way better in this. So it's interesting that he. I'm not really sure which one was filmed first. I believe Halloween 6 was filmed first, but he really stepped it up in that time. And I don't have a huge opinion on him either way either. I've seen the ones that you mentioned, and I think he can do comedy decently, but I'm not like a hardcore Rudd guy or anything.
Hmm. Yeah, he was good for the role, and he's been in Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Knocked Up. He's good at those kinds of comedic roles, but I've also seen him in comedies where I wasn't especially I where he wasn't memorable.
Hmm.
This was his breakout film, I suppose, and so he's aged very well. He still uh, looks much the same, and more power to him. I suppose he's had a somewhat long career by now.
Yeah, yeah, 30 years this year.
But I do like to go back a few minutes ago. I do like the dynamic of, and they said as much in the making of Clueless. They wanted to have a dynamic between the father and Cher, as everybody else is afraid of him. He's like this really rough around the edges lawyer, but to her, he's just daddy. And I liked seeing that dynamic because he really does cherish her and he's protective of her, but he's a rough man to get to know. He's not warm except towards her. So I appreciated their dynamic for what it's worth.
Yeah. All the almost all the dynamics in this movie are really well done. And it's, Alicia Silverstone unfortunately kind of didn't really have too much of a follow-up. She was in Batman and Robin, and I think that movie was so
Canned.
yeah, that I think that it kind of took her down with it in a way because she's relatively vanished. But almost everyone else in this has been around and continues to be around. And Breckin Meyer has been in some comedies, and we mentioned Wallace Shawn and Paul Rudd. Was there anything else about it, and should we rate it? Oh, and you also know our next movie too.
So we're hoping to, let's go ahead and rate it, and then we'll announce what we're watching. A very stark contrast to Clueless, but important nonetheless. So on a scale from 1 to 10, I would say I'm going to give it an 8.25 star rating. Again, kind of going back to how I was relating to the wrestler, there's nothing that could be improved, nothing that could be bettered. There are comedies which I suppose, in terms of just the laughs that they continue to elicit from me, the interest I have in those other comedic classics, they're equal to, if not slightly surpassing Clueless, and that's why I'm hesitant to go above an 8.25, but it's one of my favorite comedies. It always has been. There's nothing that I would necessarily change or improve about it, but there are other comedies which are just as endearing to me and which I love equally, if not more so.
Yeah, I was gonna mention Airheads earlier also as another 90s comedy that like really, I mean, talking about a clear plot, like Airheads has a great clear plot line, but I'm actually gonna go, I might give it a 9. I might go pretty high because I mean I hadn't seen it in a long time and I had pretty low expectations. I was like, this is gonna have, some really 90s stuff, and that might be the funny part of it. The how it's aged might be the funny part of it, but instead the joke still worked, which was really surprising. And I do think that I could watch it again like right now and still laugh, even though I just watched it. So I think that I'm going to give it a pretty high score. And yeah, so that's my rating.
Yeah, I do think it's unfortunate that you were saying that some of the majority of the actors continue to have careers to some extent, and I kind of have a different take on it because Alicia Silverstone didn't. I mean, she could have. I don't know what happened. I think she just. And that's another thing about her too, is I saw her in one other movie where I was very, very impressed. It's called The Crush, and she was very young in that movie and plays a sociopath and a violent one in that, and does a really good job. That movie came out not too shortly before Clueless, maybe within a year or two before. And she did a really phenomenal job, especially considering how young she was to be playing such an out of control, demonic character. And then after Clueless, she just kind of didn't produce quality work after that. And I'm not really sure. I'm sure that there are many competing elements that contributed to that. I think she did not want to be typecast in a very looks oriented type of role. I think that came into a couple of her interviews that I happened to read or see. But she didn't do much thereafter. Stacey Dash went more into politics. Brittany Murphy, like I said, passed away at age 32. Paul Rudd, I would say, and of course, Wallace Shawn, I would say within the film, those are the two actors which have had the best staying power.
Yeah. And next?
We're going to be doing Before the Devil, Knows You're Dead. That's one of my favorite movies, as many of the ones that we review are and have been. That one is a very different, just a very different plot and energy and cast of characters, and nothing at all in common with Clueless, but we're going to review it nonetheless, and we're excited to do so here on Hipsterless Hangout.
Right. Don't be a hipster,
but do hang
out.
out. Doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo.